Hey guys, I'm back with another crochet stitch tutorial, and today we are talking about the foundation single crochet. This is a really useful stitch for lots and lots of projects where you don't want to make a row of chains and then a row of single crochets. This is kind of a cheat sheet way to get there, or a little more complex way to create that first row. But this is my foundation single crochet little row, and then I have a regular, I've chained at the beginning and done a row of single crochet, and they look pretty similar between the two, but you can see that the chains at the bottom have like a line from where I've crocheted. It's not necessarily as stretchy as the foundation single crochet. This is really flexible. If you can see on the bottom, it stretches just as equally as the top, where the row of chains and single crochets, it really kind of only stretches along the top side. The bottom side where the chains are is just not as flexible. So if you're making a blanket or a wrap or scarf, or really any project that just has the first row of single crochets, you can substitute the foundation single crochet instead of the chains and row of stitches. But it's really useful when you want to have that nice flexible first row that can be just as flexible as the top of your project, so that way you don't make a blanket where the bottom is tighter and then the top is, you know, more flexible and similar to what you're making throughout. So this is what we're going to talk about making today. Okay, to start off, for your foundation single crochet, you're going to make a slip knot just like you would any other start of the project. Let's try this again. There we go. Tighten that down. So one of the things when you're making a foundation single crochet stitch, or any other of the foundation stitches, is you want to make sure you don't your stitches too tightly. It can cause curving, and it can be really hard to find where to put your hook if you're wrapping the yarn too tightly. So just keep that in mind as we get going. But to get going with the foundation single crochet stitch, we're going to chain 2. Okay, that's how we're going to start. And then I like to turn my work so that I can put my hook into that very first chain. So I'm going to stick my hook into the first chain. And the easy way to remember these foundation stitches is that you always want to make, just like our swatch here where we did the chains and then we did the single crochet, you are going to make the bottom chain. So I'm going to pull up a loop just like I would a single crochet stitch, except I want to make the bottom chain. So I want to chain 1. Okay, keep an eye on that chain because that's going to be where we put our hook for the next stitch. But we're going to chain 1, then we have, just like a regular single crochet stitch where you have 2 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And that is, if I turn it back 90 degrees, that is the first stitch. I know the first stitch looks a little bit like a big blob, but you'll see you have your V on top, and then on the bottom it doesn't really look like anything yet, but as we get going, I promise it will start to look like that beautiful swatch we had going earlier before. Okay, so the next stitch, where we made that first chain before, it's a little bit difficult to see, but here is the loop. That's where our first chain went, these V's. We're gonna stick our hook between this side of the loop and that middle section in there. Some people suggest if you turn it over to the bottom, you can see a V an upside down V here. You want to stick your loop in there, or your hook in there, but I like to turn my work perpendicular to how I would normally work my rows, and I work my foundation chain kind of vertically. So I'm gonna stick my hook in here between those. There's gonna be, if I turn to the back side, you'll see that I've stuck it under 2 loops. And what do we do first? We pull up a loop, we chain 1, finish out the single crochet. And there's my second stitch. I'm gonna keep sticking my hook in here. These are the V's from my chain 1. If I turn it over, there's a V right here that I want to stick my hook under those. So another way is the V on the front. This is why I like to work vertically for these foundation stitches. I see the V right here on the front. I like to stick my hook right in the middle of it, and I always make sure that when I kind of turn it to the side that I have 2 loops that I've stuck my hook under. So we're kind of splitting that foundation chain that we made. So pull up a loop. Remember, chain 1 first, finish out your single crochet. So you can start to see there's little V's as we go along the foundation. I'll do it again. So in the middle of this V right here, stick my hook, kind of make sure I have 2 loops that I've stuck it under, yarn over, pull up a loop, kind of chain 1, yarn over, and you can watch that chain 1 as we finish out the stitch. So yarn over and pull through 2 loops. You can see how that chain that we made kind of turns to the side, and now we see the V right here to keep sticking our chain in. And this takes some practice to get used to where you're putting your hook, but also to keep the tension the same. It's really easy on, oops, I'm in the wrong spot here. It's really easy to get your hook in the wrong spot. It's really easy to pull. So when you pull up the loop, I like to turn my hook and make sure it's perpendicular to my foundation chain stitches. So this loop looks a little longer than the loops that's on my hook, but they're kind of the same height. I like to do that to kind of help keep the tension before I make my chain 1. It's a little counterintuitive to try and make that first chain, the loop you drop, longer, but it really does help as you're making these stitches. So let's continue on, and sometimes you have to kind of apply the yarn. You know, I'm using kind of a thinner worsted weight yarn here. Pull up a loop, chain 1, finish out my single crochet, yarn over and pull through 2, find that V in the middle. And we just, I don't need to yarn over, keep on going for the number of foundation chains that your pattern calls for. So another thing you need to keep in mind, especially if your pattern just calls for chains and a row of single crochets in each chain, that you can substitute this instead if you prefer, but you need to make sure that however many number of stitches you have in row 1, that's how many foundation chains you have. So if you're making our foundation single crochet stitches that you would need to make. So if the pattern calls for chain 10 and then single crochets for row 1 and the finished stitch count is 9, then your row of just foundation single crochet stitches would just need to be 9. You don't want to make 10, that would be too many. So just keep that in mind, and I'll make sure to link you to some other resources below that can help you with those kinds of tips. But let's make one more here. Okay, so we've been making this vertically. You can see kind of looks like little V's along the side. Here's the bottom. It looks really pretty. It kind of looks the same as the top of the rows. If I can flip this back over, you can see V's. If I lay it down here, now it looks like a nice flat row. It's really important, like sometimes it'll curve, and that tends to be where I've pulled my loop that I've drawn up a little too tight. So just try and remind yourself to keep that loose, and that doing it vertically can help you pull that up the right amount. Another thing to point out is that when you're doing your row 2, so let's practice doing second row. We'll do chain 1 and single crochet all the way back. Okay, so we're almost to the end of that first row of single crochets, and remember the first stitch that we made is kind of bulky. It's got those 2 chains and kind of how we just got started. You just want to go into, I have 2 stitches left, so I have a stitch here, and then this is the top loops of the very first one. So I don't stitch into those chain 2 that we made in the beginning. And I know the first time I tried it, it just seems weird, like you're just gonna have this bulky end over here to your work, but I promise you it does not look that way. In the end, start row 3, and you can see that spot down there, you don't really see that it looks like, you know, it doesn't have a bunch of extra stitches on it. So what do you think? Let me know how helpful this tutorial was. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel so you can get updates and other people can find these tutorials and my other videos. I'll also link to some patterns down below that use the foundation single crochet. So if you're looking for a project, those would be a great place to start. And thanks for watching.